Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Anders Eving Kirke, and I'm responsible for the cost accounting and actually cost management as a whole in Dynamics 365 for operations. How many of you actually worked with the old cost accounting in 2012? There are a few hands here. Great. So, and you were probably wondering when you saw AX7 as we shipped it that there were no cost accounting in it. Because what were we thinking? There was a good idea behind that. We used all our resources to actually focus on cost management, to build as much inventory capabilities with the new workspaces that you could actually get your inventory and the cost management content pack available for you. And at the same time, we were really looking at the cost accounting, and we came to the conclusion that we cannot bring it forward. It doesn't needs our goals. There is no capability in it for us. So what I can say here is today is whatever you knew about the old cost accounting, forget about it, because we have not reused a single line of code. Everything is rewritten from scratch. And we have been doing that. Well, we actually have 1 year anniversary here in December because we started actually the week before we went on Christmas holiday, me and one engineer, to actually plan how we're going to actually design the new cost accounting. So we have 1 year anniversary. We have the fall release out, where we have the basics of the cost accounting, and we're also working on the spring release to actually extend some of the capabilities. And I will go through both the fall release and the spring here in my half hour. I'll see how much I can manage. So some of the design principles we had in mind was it has to be simple and reusable configuration. We want to use standard domain terminology. So you should be able to take any cost accounting book, all your knowledge from prior system, and understand cost accounting in AX. The key components we are really working with is cost objects, cost elements, and statistical elements. Very basic, actually. And we are working with something called data connectors, because the new cost accounting is actually built for the cloud to begin with. So the whole model of cost accounting is actually isolated in its own model. And whenever we need to talk to a system, in this case, Dynamics 365 for operation, it happens between a model that is Dynamics AX cost accounting. So we don't know AX or operations. We can import from any tool in the world through our connectors. And this is how you configure the system going forward. It doesn't make it complicated. It just means that you can take data from any system and put it into cost accounting and work with it afterwards. I will show you that later. So default out of the box, we are shipping connectors for Microsoft Dynamics 365 for operations to get your general ledger data in, your budget data in. You can actually have connectors to Excel, so you can actually import via data entities from any system via the Excel data entity framework. And on top of that, we are also having connectors, so you can actually get statistical figures out of any table of AX for statistical measures. In the past, you only had two options, which was actually production hours and you had project hours. Now you can go in and pick any table that has financial dimensions on it and build your own connector. And then you can actually retrieve data from there. I want to show that in a few minutes as well. On top of that, we now have something called cost accounting ledger. We actually have a true ledger that you define. A ledger is not legal entity bound. This is very important. We don't understand, again, the concept of the legal entity of AX. Cost accounting works completely on top of that. Everything is global because you, via the connector, decide from which legal entities you are importing data. So what is new is also a cost accounting ledger is having a currency. It has an exchange rate table. It has a cost element dimension table. It has a cost object dimensions. Actually, it has multiple cost object dimensions, depending on how many dimensions you want to track cost on. But it's a true ledger. And you can actually take data from multiple legal entities, and we convert it into one common currency. And you can pick if the exchange rate needs to be fixed or variable rate. Because when you do your managerial accounting, you might do it in fluctuation rate or you might do it in a fixed rate. And you can even compare that afterwards. And we will prove to you, when we import the data, we import it in the currency of the time we imported it, and then in cost accounting, we actually convert it. So again, a cost accounting ledger is a new concept of a true ledger, because you defined the ledger as a user, and you can create as many as you like in cost accounting. And the reason is really, you might, in a global business, legal entities are made for a purpose of financial accounting, and they are following different legal requirements for doing your legal entities. And a lot of it is based on taxation requirements. Cost accounting is internal managerial accounting. We don't work within the boundary of legal entities. So you might have an IT manager in US that are responsible, especially in the cloud business, that are responsible for cost centers across legal entities. And if he needs to do internal accounting, understanding his cost center, are we on budget or not? He needs to look at data on a very global scale and see, hey, I'm on budget on all my cost centers around in the world because I'm the manager in that organization of the whole IT. This is what cost accounting provides you that you don't have in the general ledger accounting. On the calculation side, we have the basic calculations. We have cost behavior. In the old cost accounting, you could actually only do cost behavior by percentage, fixed and variable. Now we actually allow you to actually build it based on amount as well. So you can actually say a fixed amount and then everything on top of that is going to be variable. Or you can even combine them and say, well, we know that we have a certain fixed amount and then the rest 10% on top of that will be, and then you know how we're going to calculate it. Cost distribution, the same. That's very basic. You actually distribute cost based on your allocation base. The thing is that we have made it much more advanced, so you can actually define your own allocation bases. I will briefly show you how we're going to do that. And what is most important is really transparency afterwards. We have full traceability of everything that goes on in cost accounting. Everything is done by a journal. Nothing happens, nothing is posted without we having a journal that did the event. We have the entries before we post, and we have the output. On every output, we have direct access to the rule that was used to actually calculate this output. We also have the statistical measures that was used by the rule to actually come to that information. On top of that, everything is data effective. So if you change the policies of the distribution, everything is recorded and we still have the history. So when you look back in time and you have changed the rules in the future, we always have the rule that created this specific actually cost end-to-end distribution. Something you never had before in cost accounting either. We have the allocation, which is much similar to cost distribution. It's just that it's the balance of the cost object. But what we do now for allocation is that we are using the reciprocal method, meaning the user do not have to sit and create the order of how you're going to do your allocations, because in the old cost accounting, it was really depending on in which order you place the rules, the result. So actually you could run a run, get one result, move one rule 5 levels up, run another another calculation, and you got a different result. Okay, I'll move it 2 steps up, but when is it right and wrong? I have no clue. So what we're doing now is we're really running full reciprocal method. So the user will simply just create the policy with the allocation rules in it and execute it, and nothing else. Then we have the cost roll-up, which is actually a way of rolling up cost, because you might have a lot of cost elements and you don't necessarily want to track your cost when you start allocating between all your cost centers in your company. So we support that you can add these cost roll-up policies, how you want to roll up the cost. They are not part of the rule of allocation or allocation anymore. They are a rule and policy by themselves, so you can change the roll-up without changing the allocation rules. That is, again, significantly make it a lot easier for you to actually administrate the system afterwards. And you can actually run without it. If you want a full detailed allocation of every single cost element between your cost centers, you can run without cost roll-up. And it actually also performs. Finally, we have the overhead rates, which is just giving you a cost per statistical element that was used for allocating the cost out of a cost center. But that overhead rates really give you the picture of what was the cost per unit of output of that cost center, and you get it with the roll-up. So again, it's not just by a single fat number, it's actually per the elements and your roll-up definitions in it. So you can actually get the details if you want to approve or improve that output cost per unit in that cost center, because of course you can do this by actual and budget or revised budget and see did we actually do it on budget and which element of the cost in that cost unit was actually causing that we were not meeting our budget for that matter. Finally, reporting and BI. You will not really see, I say reporting, you will not see a single SSIS report in cost accounting. The framework is not, the way AX is using the framework is not good enough. So the most of the cost accounting issues we had in the past was always about the EDS report, that it was simply not performing, it didn't work, it was complex. So the idea was simply to use and find other methods of doing reporting. So what we will do is that we are supporting in the fall release export to Excel of all our data, which give you lots more flexibility. And then we have a workspace. And why I put Power BI here and mobile app is that we are shipping here in either end of December or in January. We are going to ship a content pack, and we will also ship a mobile app. Over time. Roadmap for the spring release. For the spring release here, I have put a few pictures of the things we're shipping. You have the mobile app here, and you have the Power BI. And what you actually see here is this is Power BI completely embedded into AX. I want to show that in a few seconds. So not only can you now insert objects of a Power BI reporting into a workspace, but you can actually also embed and get the full embedded Power BI experience. So the user can actually do his own reporting and own visualizations in AX without having to go to Power BI. What do we want to do for the spring release? And we're working on right now. I already talked about it, that we are doing the cost element and cost object dimension mapping. Because when you have multiple legal entities and you want to combine them for managerial accounting, you can have that problem that they have different statutory financial chart of accounts they have to apply. So you cannot just take the numbers and put them together because the cost elements, meaning the main accounts in this case, is not really following each other, but the cost is the same and you want for managerial them to be at the same level. So what we have is you can actually create either decide which of them is the master and actually make the mapping, or you can actually import a third one you want to use for managerial accounting and map both of them, and then we can actually read the data in. And that is also useful if you're buying another company that use another system, that you can actually do this mapping of all the dimensions, and then you can load the data in. Then on the allocation basis, when we shipped the fall release, we only had predefined allocation basis, which was a statistical element automatically become an allocation base that you can use. Now we have that you can define allocation basis. The predefined are again the one that we created by statistical element. Number of employees per cost center, number of production hours of a product, and so on. Now we have a formula where you can actually put multiple statistical elements together. So you don't have to do the equation of a factor and so on in Excel and then import. You can actually import them as different statistical elements and actually call it another allocation base, and you can use it in the rules. Hierarchy is that, let's say exactly, number of employees. I might have one statistical element and allocation base called number of employees, which is good for some distribution allocations. But if a manager takes an expenses to his cost center and he now wants to distribute it to his or her employees in the cost centers he's responsible for, he cannot use the allocation base of all employees because they will simply go to all cost centers that has employees. So instead he can actually put a hierarchy of the whole organization and say, this is my employees group, and my cost should only be allocated, distributed to these employees. And again, you can create all of these and you can reuse them for the system. For me, the most technical part that we are really looking forward to bring into the spring, and we have started working on it in January, is we want to be able to get data from AX 2012 into cost accounting. Because right now, we can actually ship cost accounting as a completely sealed code package. We don't need the AX7. We don't need any AX at all. But the idea would be, if we can actually get data pushed, and it's going to be a push. We are trying to look for subscription. Doesn't seem to work right now. We don't have a framework. But what we are focusing on right now is to be able to actually push the data from an AX 2012 version up to cost accounting in the cloud. And that means suddenly, because again, when you do managerial accounting, we know that you're not upgrading, let's say, 50 legal entities to AX7 within 2 months, and then you can use managerial accounting and cost accounting. It will not happen in that speed. So in this case, we will have to be able to take data from multiple versions into the cloud to make that managerial accounting. And this is what we're trying to do with actually making connectors that can push the data to the cloud. System management. I'll use all my time going through this. System management is that we want this to be as easy as possible, because it was not easy in the old cost accounting. So first of all, we are going to create a wizard that will help you create these ledgers by actually asking you questions, and then we will define the cost accounting entities behind that. We are not there yet. We haven't built it, but we have ideas. Then we're making a workspace for administration of the ledgers afterwards, because this is really where it is really time-consuming for cost accountants to sit, because they often don't know when new elements are created. Somebody created a new cost center in a legal entity. To get that notification, how that impacts the ledger of the organization, is really difficult to figure out. But we are creating a workspace which will actually find that and validate. Right now we have 22 rules that we are going to validate if the cost accountant needs to actually go and update, because that element that was just created and imported into cost accounting has not been associated with a hierarchy. It's not part of a distribution rule. It's not covered by this. All of this information will then be provided in a workspace to the cost accountant per ledger, so he knows what he needs to go and fix. It's not that we will make it completely a robot that you just by pressing a button, it fixes it. But we are trying to give you as much information that something has changed of your base data, you need to go and react on it. Yes, that was it for PowerPoint. Let's go and look at the cost accounting. So this is the workspaces, and you can actually see that we have one workspace down here. So this is the one we're working on right now that is without an icon. So that's why. So cost controlling. This is also one thing that was really a problem with the old cost accounting was we have all these cost center managers. They would like to know how their cost center performs. The problem is an EDS report will give them data that they're not supposed to see, because you will not print it per every single cost center and send it over if you have 2,000 cost centers in your organization. So what we have actually made is a workspace that can be assigned to any user of AX. And you only need access to be something called a team user. That means it's a subscription to the user that doesn't really require a license. I think you get all the team users more or less for free, if I remember it right. And they can access this workspace only. They cannot see anything in cost accounting. What they can only see is the output of cost accounting. So they can actually go in here and see how their cost center perform, because it is secured by an organization hierarchy where you assign a user to each of the cost centers, and then it works upstream for the managers. So they can log into this, and they will only see the data that they are actually supposed to see. For cost accounting, so this is again a hierarchy structure. So here, this is again a hierarchy that the cost accountant has made available. So this is something the cost accountant configures which reports are available in the workspace for the cost center managers. So again, it's not the users themselves. This is pre-configured by a cost accountant. I simply don't have time to show how he does that. But he decides which cost element dimension hierarchy is available here. So this is the way they're seeing it. So all people are seeing exactly the same information. Sorry. And again, like you have seen before, we can actually add Power BI in here on top of it. Right now, it is not secured. So this is not filtered by the user logging in right now. And this is something we're working on together with our BI team to say, because we have the hierarchy in BI with our users and our security model, we believe that we can actually get it to work. So even the Power BI that are embedded here will also be actually filtered based on the user who logs in. But this is something we're working on right now. But this is just to give each cost center manager more information, more visual information of how the cost center is performing. And here you can actually see what is the use of this. One KPI for this cost center manager could be, I want to know my employees. He has 2 employees. Well, I need to know the cost per employee. It might not necessarily be my output, cost per employee, but it might be one of the KPIs I'm using. So this is one of the statistical information I can pull into cost accounting and use to define my own KPIs. So we're building the framework for you to define the KPIs for each cost center. We are not defining them, but the tool is there for you to actually create them. It could also be the cost per sales order if this was a cost center for selling, for instance. Sorry. So if we go in here, even a cost center manager with security on, he can go in and actually see details, because he might really question, well, I want to understand, well, we use so much more than our budget for traveling. I want to see my travel expenses in more detail. So we can actually either go in here on the individual business travel and see it. Well, that was not it. We're only $7 above budget, and we have a threshold here set in the workspace that's not alarming us. But I can actually go even on the header here and say, give me the details. And again, if we had security, whatever he sees when you go into the details here is also secured. So we are securing it all the way down when we're securing it. So here you can see the actual cost elements that are actually building up the business travel expenditure. And we can actually go in here to this one. And now he wants to see the cost entries. So he can see how much of this cost entry is actually driving the cost, or if there were more entries that were driving the balance, this is where he can see the entries. So in this case, I know that this is actually a distributed cost that went into my cost center, so I can actually press the allocation base if I want to see how this cost was actually distributed to me. And in this case, I can actually see that it was based on occupation and cleaning factor per square meter. So I know that I have a statistical element of how many square meters each cost center consumes in the factory. We also know that we are not paying the same amount for cleaning the office square meter versus the production square meters. So I also have a factor actually determining the cost per clean, and this is the combination of those. It becomes a factor, and that's how we're distributing the cost. And I can see how much I'm consuming of each of the factors per the cost centers. Sorry. And I can also trace the rule back and see this is actually the distribution rules that was used for distributing the cost here. So this is the traceability that a guy can actually go in at any given point of time on a single cost entry and traverse it back. What happened? Why did it actually been created? I want to show one thing in the cost accounting. I mentioned that we are working with our connectors. And if we go to our connector here, this is the one I'm using. We go to our actual versions, manage our data sources, general ledger data sources. We can actually see here that I've created a data connector. In this case, it's a Dynamics 365 for operation data connector. And here I'm configuring what data it's going to pull out of my system. So this is how it really works, that you can actually go and create as many of these connectors as you like. You define the name of the connector, you define the connector type, and then you configure, depending on the connector, so what is it that it's supposed to pull out? When we know it's an AX general ledger connector, it tells me, well, select the legal entity and select the posting layers that you want to pull out. If I create another one here, as you can see right now, we are supporting 2. And again, this is fully extendable. This is very also important to mention here, especially from your partner side, that you can extend this. Everything here is fully extendable by the partners. Our code is sealed, but all of these entities here can be extended. There is an extended framework, so you can build your own. You're never supposed to touch our, but you create your own instead. And if I go here and configure, you will actually see, because it's now imported transactions, you can see that actually the information I need to provide is much different than it was an AX connector. I'll just skip it. I was mentioning that you can actually pull out data from everywhere in AX where the tables are actually having financial dimensions on it, because right now that is our only bridge to actually bridge the cost to the statistical information, is that we have a dimension that actually match it. So here I have employees of the company, which is both the FTEs plus contractors, or I have FTEs only, full-time employees only. And the thing is really I can click here to give it a name, then I'm selecting the table I want to look at, and then we have a function also here. So now you can actually do both a function count or a sum. Sum means that it actually counts up, because if it's production, you need to know if it is production hours, and then you will sum up the production hours. Count really just count the records of a table and provide you the result of the count of the table. So this is also a new feature that we added in. And again, this is also why I don't have to provide any sum field here. And the difference is really when I go for FTEs only, for my statistical element, well, I can put a range on and say, well, from this table, give me only the FTEs, for instance. And you can create as many as you like in this design here. Just briefly go to the allocation basis. So this is really the allocation base here, that I've created a new one with consume already defined allocation bases. And if we go to my hierarchy, we can see here that I actually have one that is taking my allocation base FTE, and it uses my cost object dimension hierarchy, the organization, and then it actually selects a level within the hierarchy where it actually says this is only the cost centers we're going to use for this when we're going to distribute the cost. What can we do when we export data? Well, I promised that we don't have an EDS report anymore, but actually just by exporting using our data entity framework, you will be able to build that you get all your cost entries aggregated out and all your statistical entries aggregated out. And then you can, in a few seconds, you can actually build an EDS report like this, or you can build charts and you can build filtering. Whatever you can do in Excel, you can do on top of the data. And what you do is that you simply go here and press refresh once you have new data, and everything in your charts and in everything will just be updated automatically. And that makes it so simple. And one of the nice things I really like is also by using Excel versus using an SSIS report was the interactions I can actually do. So here, because we're working with versions, and this is also very important to state out, I know that a cost accountant might have to do multiple iterations by closing in a month. So he will not only do one calculation per month, he might have to do multiple calculations to actually get to the right result that he expects. We will store every single calculation run by a unique ID of date and time. And which you can see here, I've actually also been running a couple of runs here on the 30th of December. And each of them are per the ledger, per date, per period, and then the time. So what I can actually do is, in Excel, I can sit and compare my two calculations to see what the difference were from calculation 1 to calculation 2. That's a nice thing to know, wait, I changed something in my rules. What were the output of the change of that actually from a business perspective? It also means that, well, I can actually remove the calculation and say, let's see the data prior we did the allocation and distribution. Am I correct with my numbers? And here we can actually see we have our cost center, which is a dummy cost center where the accountant posts cost that they don't know which cost centers it should go to. And when I put my calculation on, I can actually verify again that it actually got distributed out to the cost centers who actually consume the cost. So this again, Excel is much better and much more easy to work with, if I can even read on my screen here. And then suddenly the numbers are back to what they were before. So again, Excel provides you these capabilities much better than I will be able to build in SSIS, and I will waste my time building reporting capabilities that is already available in another tool. So this is really how we put our effort in. Finally, I promised you Power BI. If we go back here. So we have a workspace, second workspace that we're working on right now, just briefly, 2 seconds before we go to the Power BI, where I said we want to make it easier for the cost accountant to administrate the ledger afterwards. We're not completely done with that yet. But per ledger, you will be able to see which dimensions and the count of dimensions that you're using in this ledger. Then we're doing a validation of all your rules and policies that you have defined, and we're also adding our rules and policies. And you can actually see that as a summary here. And we can also go to setup, and this is actually the rules that we are right now enforcing on the system. Again, it's extendable. The partners can create their own rules for the customer on top of this framework to actually add them to this list. And let's say we have a warning here, and this is because I have this access level hierarchy set up for my security. And because of that, it will actually tell me, well, you have cost centers that you have not added to that security model. So these costs will not be part of that, and nobody will be able to see the cost on these cost centers. So I should go and fix my security hierarchy for that. And again, we also have a set of warnings, of course, because, again, we don't know necessarily on your other hierarchies if you want all elements to flow in or not, but we will at least advise you that you are having a new element or an other old element that was not assigned to that hierarchy. And if you don't want to see that message again, well, you can simply just disable the message, and it's gone. You will never see that message again. Because now you're taking a firm decision that that is truly not a problem for your configuration. Power BI. So we have something now, when we ship the new content, how many have worked with the content packs we ship for X7? The cost management and the financial management? only a few people. Fine. So the old content packs were available on powerbi.com, and you had to give your AX instance, and then it started flowing. What we're doing now with the content pack is that they're shipped as LCS asset. So you go to a LCS asset and you say deploy. And I don't yet remember how you're doing the deployment, I must admit. But I will show you how the cost accounting once it is deployed. So once it is deployed, you will go here to AX, and you will search for, let me see if I remember, NTT store. Yep. So once you deploy an LCS asset library component, you will get that into this table here. And for cost accounting, we're going to have this one. This is not shipped yet, but we plan to ship it in, let's say, hopefully before New Year's, but it might be in January. So once that one is shipped, you will get it in here. And once it's in here, it will actually also be available as an icon on the places you choose to add it. And that means, and right now, the icon becomes under the links section of a workspace. So, and as I don't have a links section on this workspace yet, on my workspaces, so to speak, I put it right now just for showing you under cost management, cost administration. You can see down here, this little icon here, and this section was actually created because I deployed this, and I said I wanted it to become available. And when I click here, what it actually does is that it actually opens up a fully embedded Power BI within AX. So you're not leaving AX as such. And that's also why here you actually see visualization that I did not enter into my workspace by pinning the different visualizations. And here you can actually start working and create your own visualizations in Power BI. So that was a brief run on cost accounting for the fall release and for the spring release. We have a wiki section available. There is an on-hand lab which goes through 32 exercises where you learn the basic of the fall release. And again, we hope to be able to actually keep updating this wiki page with more information about how to actually deploy the new cost accounting.